All right. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Webb, and I'm an educational developer with the Studio for Teaching and Learning. In case anyone is joining us and is not able to visually see the visual content, we're going to try and provide some verbal descriptions. I have to admit that I am a woman in my middle years, middle age, because my gray hair won't let me get away with saying otherwise. I also wear blue glasses and have a red whale-shaped birthmark on my left cheek. And I am sitting in front of a background of Halifax Harbor at sunset. I'm now going to turn over the virtual mic to my co-presenters for today's presentation and allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Justin. I'm with the Software and Application Support Center as a digital trainer. To describe myself, to appear a little better, I'm a recent male graduate from St. Mary's. I have a reddish orange beard, and I will pass it on to my other presenter.
Hi everybody, my name is Hollis. I'm actually both a student and a digital technology assistant with the Software and Application Support Center. I am currently masked because I am at SMU, so I'm just going to make sure, because I'm using a public space, that we're taking care of that. I've got kind of faded, dyed red hair. I'm wearing a necklace and a light t-shirt, and I'm currently sitting in front of an aerial shot of SMU that is very blue tone.
Thank you, Hollis and Justin. I want to start by describing our first slide, and hopefully everyone can see it. When I say that, I hope it's working. On our first slide, there is an image of a padlocked door, and to the right is a key icon, and on that is the digital accessible symbol. So we want to unlock our PDFs and make sure they're accessible. All right. So in this session, we will be exploring, do you need a PDF? Is the source document accessible? And what do you need to create more accessible PDFs? So portable document format, better known as PDFs, were first developed so that people could share files and the end user didn't have to have the software that created the document. PDFs are well suited to documents that are being printed, but not necessarily the best choice for online distribution or consumption. So web file formats are usually more accessible. So the first question that we're going to ask is, we want you to think about, do you really need to use a PDF document? Would the file be more accessible in Word, PowerPoint, or in another web format? So once you've confirmed that you need a PDF, the best way to start is to have an accessible source document. So I'm going to turn the digital mic over to Justin, who will now walk us through the steps for making sure that we have an accessible source document. And I'm going to stop sharing so that he can share.
Thank you, Jennifer. So just let me get our document open here in Word. So this is just we're going to run through pretty much 5 or 6 basic things that you need to do to make sure that your Word document, at least your source document, is accessible as possible. So up here on the screen, I just have a little excerpt from our accessibility document. And here you can see it has paragraphs, there's some bolded parts, we have some lists or bullet points, we have some links, we have other text that is highlighted red, we have some images, we have a table, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through and just quickly go through all the key points that you have to touch when you're making your document, or at least you want your source document to be accessible as possible. So the first thing we're going to go over is font. You want to use sans serif fonts such as Arial, Calibri, etc. So right now we just have this on Calibri. We also recommend a size 12 font size. That way it's larger font, it's more accessible. We are putting spaces between paragraphs, and we are also giving our documents headers. So, sorry about that. The mouse pad decided to zoom in. So when we're getting our documents headers, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to allow that to come through in a screen reader, and it's also going to increase the navigation of the document itself through the navigation pane. So when we have our document and we're first setting it up, if you're just typing a text paragraph and you're on the Home tab along Microsoft Word in the top, if you come to the center where the Styles tab is, you can see right now that we're in our normal paragraph style. So that's our, if we make it our size 12 font in Calibri, we can see we're on normal style. When we want to insert a header, we can just highlight maybe our introduction or the different headers within our document, and we can click heading 1 or heading 2, depending on how we're setting up the document. So what that's going to do is going to change the style. It's going to mark it as a header within the Word document. And what will happen is once you have these headers, if you open the navigation pane and you go to the headings, what you can see here is our different headings of the document. So not only does it make it more accessible and easier for screen readers to interpret what's a heading and not, it also adds to the navigation of the document and in the creation of a table of contents if you were creating a longer document or report. The next thing we want to just touch on quickly is we want to avoid using hard to see contrast colors. Like if we had red text on a white or green background, here it's harder to see. So what we want to do instead is, instead of using color to create emphasis, we recommend using bolding. So in this case, we know that when things are bolded, it's creating emphasis. We don't want any unnecessary bolding or bolding whole sentences or areas where it's not needed. So I'll just do this as an example. The next thing I'm going to go over is the layout. So when we're making our document, instead of typing up things in a paragraph, is it possible for us to split it into a list? So to do that, you can start a new line. You can hit the bullet button from the home ribbon bar, or you can hit the number button if you want to create a numbered list, and you can add your list. And it will continue at each time you hit enter. Another thing that we want to cover is with hyperlinks. So when you're putting a hyperlink into your document, you don't want to just insert the link and have the full URL available. To make documents more accessible, you only want to underline your hyperlinks. You don't want to be underlining other areas of the text. And when you do a hyperlink, you want the hyperlink's name to be the title of the document or the web page name, instead of just please click here. You want it to be like, please visit the title of the document. And then the screen reader, while it's reading through that, will indicate that that is a hyperlink. And then the student or whoever's using the document will be able to see that. So if we just copy this link and we wanted to make the title of the document the hyperlink, I'm just going to highlight it, right-click the document, select link. Here we can see the title of the document, and for the address, we're going to paste the URL here, or the website that we want to link it to. We're going to click OK. Now in our document, it's now more accessible. We have the URL linked to the title of the document, and so on. The next thing to cover is what happens when we're using images or tables in our document. How can we make those more accessible? So while you're inserting images into your document, what's going to happen is when a screen reader gets to it, it's not going to know what to do. So what we want to do is add alternative text, also known as alt text. So what you do is you select your image, and then a new button will appear on the ribbon bar in Word called Picture Format. And then we want to click on provided I don't select anything else, the alt text button. And this is going to open up the alt text window. So here, this is where you would describe what's happening within that image or screenshot or figure. And Word also has the ability to generate the alt text for you. So it will look online and it will use AI and it will try to come up with some alt text for you. However, as in this case, you can see it's not really that useful. What we would want to put in this case is on the export tab of the software, we are clicking on the create PDF XPS document, and then a new button shows up, create PDF XPS. So you would type that here. And we would just continue typing that out. Also, maybe you just put the image in as decorative, and maybe it does not add anything into the document you are creating. You can click on mark as decorative as well. The other thing that you want to do is when you're looking at tables, so here I just made a simple table of pros and cons. I have the items for each one listed directly underneath it. I do not have any split or merged cells, or I don't have any inserted cells in the table, like additional rows or columns to create blank space. What happens then is a screen reader doesn't know how to process the empty cells in the table. So we want to make our table just as neat and as concise as possible. And then once you're done making your table, you need to add your alternative text to your table. So I'm just going to right click the arrow button here and go to table properties, and a new window will open, and then we'll go to the alt text tab, and here we can enter a title for the table. And then we can describe the table. So when you're describing the table, you're going to want to describe everything that's happening in the table, almost like a summary. And you can go on and enter the description of what's going on in your table. And finally, in Word, in PowerPoint, and in most Microsoft Office apps, when you're done making your document and you want to make sure it's accessible, you can also run the accessibility checker. So to do so, you're just going to go to the review tab in Word in this case, and you're going to press check accessibility. So what's going to happen here is the accessibility checker in Word is going to run through. It's going to, the best of its ability, going to detect errors within accessibility. So here it's telling us that our picture 2, which is a picture of Carlton in front of the atrium, is missing alternative text. So then we can make that correction, we can add the alternative text, and then we can close out of here. But what we also notice is that when you do run the accessibility checker, it's also running in the background here. So if you look at the bottom left corner of Word, we have a little accessibility symbol, and it says accessibility investigate. So that means there's some issue with our document and it's finding some error that's making it inaccessible. So once you have your Word document as accessible as you can make it, your font and layout is correct, your content is concise and as clear as possible, your images or figures and tables have alternative text, you ran through the accessibility checker, you're ready to either, you can put this document online and students can access the Word document, or if you wanted to PDF it, if you're using Adobe Acrobat or Kofax PDF, they're going to create new buttons in Word. So we'll go over that next. So what we would do if we wanted to export this to Adobe in this case, we would go File and then Save as Adobe PDF. It will open a new window. And then what we want to do is we want to click on Options. And this is going to show us the different options we have. So once we converted, like we want to convert the headings into bookmarks and so on, you're going to click OK. And then you're going to click on Save. Now, when you save it this way, what Word is doing is it's using Adobe to convert it to a PDF. So if your headings will come over into the PDF properly as headings, they won't be in there as paragraph text. But that's all stuff with tags and such that I'll let Hollis finish up with, and Jennifer. So with that, I'm just going to stop screen sharing and I'll pass it back to Jennifer and Hollis.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. I think is my screen cooperating there? Can you see it? Not yet. Can you see
You're good now.
All right. Thank you, Justin. So PDFs are only accessible if you make them accessible. They are not going to be accessible by accident. I'm willing to put money on it. Not much, but I am. So let's get started by looking at some of the characteristics for accessible PDFs. So we've heard some of the items in what was just described in our source document, but we also want things like searchable text. We want to have interactive features like hyperlinks and navigation aids. Document language and title needs to be set. The alt text that we heard, if it's not already set in your source document, needs to be set. Security, that if you are adding passwords to your document, you want to make sure that it's not hindering the assistive technology. Proper structure with tags and reading order, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And the color considerations. So no reliance on color to convey meaning, and use appropriately contrasting colors. So tags in PDFs are digital code embedded in the PDF, and they tell assistive technology how to read the content to the user. Tags include image tags, heading tags, text tags, lists, and tables. Without that, the communication of structure and relationship is really missing in your PDF. Tags tell us what's on a page, if an element is clickable, or the alt tag is describing a complex diagram. It specifies the columns and rows that make up a table and what's a header and what's not. And it specifies the number of items in a list. And all of those things are important to assistive technology. So the headers are used for navigation, and they provide an outline, and they help the reader to find information when they're looking for it. The text order, if you can imagine, you open your screen reader, it starts reading, but it's reading all over the page. So you want to set the correct language attribute so that it knows first the language. You want to have the reading order set and checked manually. Reading order should be the last thing that you check. This element must be correctly tagged and in proper order. Lists. So if you can imagine a reader just kind of going through an entire list of items without telling you that it's bulleted, or if it's a nested list, so it's a parent item or a child item, that would get quite confusing. The relationship isn't there. So lists, it's really important that all elements are tagged and tagged correctly. And tables, the same idea. So you can imagine if you didn't tag a table correctly and it was reading through just going through the content, that the relationship of what's in a row, what's in a column is really important. You want to try and avoid blank cells, and you can use merge cells in PDFs, but you have to specify what is merged, which is a little different from Word. And the accessibility checker. So the accessibility checker is a great tool, but don't depend on it as the only check. So manual intervention is required. And on this slide, we have somebody that's sanding and their hands are all full of the dust. So it's one of those, yes, you are going to have to get in there and actually look through what's happening. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Hollis to go into a little bit more detail on all of this. So I will stop sharing, Hollis, or at least I will try to. There we go.
There you go. So at this point, you should be able to see that I've got something open in Adobe. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to change the way that I'm viewing all of you, and we'll get started. So I'm going to use Adobe as an example software. These particular kinds of features typically will also appear in Kofax or other PDF checkers. And the main feature that I'm going to be focusing on today is the accessibility checker. But just before we get to that, if you import a brand new PDF into Adobe and you want to check to see if it's accessible, and you just want to make sure you've got maybe half of it already done, an easy way to do this is going through the Action Wizard. It'll walk you through a bunch of steps that will step-by-step help you make a more accessible PDF, and then you run the accessibility checker. Just gets a lot of things out of the way at first. If for whatever reason you are not seeing these options, you can always go into the More Tools option down here and scroll through the list and add them. I will say this is also for Adobe Pro, so unfortunately the free version just does not have access to these features. You can also find them under the Tools menu up at the top left corner. But to get started with the accessibility checker, along the right-hand side here, we have all of our tools, so I'm just going to click on Accessibility. That'll open our accessibility menu, and from that, I'm going to do the little check mark icon here, the accessibility check. So this particular screen you will also see in the Action Wizard if you decide to go through that. It's the very last step there. So what you're going to do is create an accessibility report, so make sure that's checked up at the top. And you're going to check all pages in the document. And then you're going to go through and see exactly what you want to check. For the most part, you're going to want all of these to be checked at some point. The one that's not automatically added by default is that tables must have a summary. It's always useful to have a bit of a summary on a table so that people can understand the context of that table, but if you've got a very, very short one, you don't always need one. But if you do have a more complex table, please, the summary is very useful. So we are going to hit Start Checking, and that's going to pull up our Accessibility Checker report on the left-hand side. You can see we now have the little accessible guy icon over here. So anything that is bolded is an issue that you're going to want to pay attention to. So once you've run this, you can see, oh look, I've got some alt text issues. So when I click on that and expand it down, I can see that something has failed. The figures alternative text is not there. So you can right-click and choose Fix. If for whatever reason you really don't want to use the suggested fix, you can hit Skip Rule, or you can explain it to find out why it's important. And that's a really, really useful option that is offered in most accessibility checkers. So if I was to hit Fix, it will bring up, oh look, we don't have Carlton the cat. So you can type in the alternative text for that Carlton the cat image of him in front of the atrium. Or if you decide that Carlton actually isn't important to the context, not that I think you would, you can hit Decorative Figure. And whenever you are done with that, you hit Save and Close. And it will show you that suddenly the alternative text is now passed. Of course, this does mean that sometimes if you fix something, other things will pop up like that. So just go through each of them as you go and see what you can do to make it more accessible. And the next big thing, as Jen was saying, you are always going to need to go through and check the reading order manually. So in order to do that, we're actually going to go to the left-hand toolbar again and click this little, it looks like a Z icon, but it's actually just 4 boxes that is being shown in a reading order. So I'm going to actually go back to page 1 because it's a bit of a better example. So here you can see that we've got a list of our reading order here, all of our various options, and you can see that it has pre-generated what looks in this particular document to be a fairly decent reading order. It's just going from top to bottom. That is the typical logical way. Now, if for whatever reason you decide, actually, I really want you to read this particular heading, Accessible Considerations for PDF, before you even read the introduction heading at the top. In order to do that, what we're going to do is click on it in the list, drag it up to the top. Oh, it doesn't like it. We're just going to put it on second then. It's a bit finicky, but you get the hang of it eventually. So you can see that now this is the second thing to be read right after the introduction. And the other big thing that you need to check manually, no matter if you use a save to PDF or an export to Adobe PDF, either way, it is imperative that you check to make sure that you actually have your tag set up correctly. So say that I've got heading 1. This is actually going to select whatever is tagged. H1 means heading, but if you needed to change that, say that this is actually just part of our paragraph, you right-click, and from the menu you can select Properties, and from the tag type, all you have to do is select that down arrow, and they are going to be alphabetically in order here. So I'm going to go down to PEEF and grab Paragraph, and then I'm going to hit Close, and you can see that this is now tagged as a paragraph. Now that is incorrectly tagged as a paragraph, but it is always a good idea to know how, in whatever software you're using, to deal with tags. I know it looks a little bit intimidating, but it is much easier in most softwares than you would actually think. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back to Jen.
All right, give me a moment to start sharing again here. All right, at this point, we thought we would open it up to questions, and hopefully you can see that screen there. And so I was just wondering if anybody has any questions for us. Well, hopefully this was helpful. We basically just kind of went through the what to consider. We do have some resources that we can share, and this video or a version of this video will be placed on the digital access tips that are provided for the studio and on the SAS page as well. So if you would like us to go into more detail on a particular software, we can set up some sessions to do that, because the software is a little bit different for each one. The features are the same, but each one in terms of location can be a little bit different. So we don't mind walking through that with you. And I think if no one has any questions, if folks want to stay on and ask a question privately, that's fine. We do try and keep these accessibility sessions down to a minimum. We're just kind of, like I said, going over the intro pieces, but we are planning to have some more detailed sessions for each of the particular softwares. All right, on that note, if no one else has any questions, I think we can wrap up.